Welcome to our webinar on building a gender intentional product strategy. Today, we'll share with you a framework that we developed along with Mansi and the Unconform team to evaluate startups and product ventures on their gender intentionality in their product strategy. Before we get started, just want to quickly introduce you to IDEO. IDEO is a 4-decade-old human-centered design firm. What we really love doing is bringing together what customers and users really want to solve big problems in their life, but making sure that alongside it being desirable for them, it is viable as a business, it is feasible technologically, and it is responsible for the environment, the planet, and the people that it's reaching. And really, at the intersection of these four concentric circles lies what we like to believe the approach to human-centered product design or innovation. In 2019, IDEO launched an innovation portfolio to support, catalyze, and scale digital financial services and other products that connect more underserved communities to the digital economy. And more specifically, within this portfolio, each year we run an accelerator program. And in our third edition of the accelerator in 2023, we took an active and intentional focus on supporting ventures that have a strategic intent to include women either as customers or as distributors of their product. And this is really what got us to work with Mansi to think about how we might evaluate these startup teams that apply to the accelerator more intentionally around their gender lens, around their gender, around their product and its application in the lives of women or people who identify as women. So let me hand it over to Mansi to quickly introduce you to Unconform.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mansi. I am the founder of Unconform. And at Unconform, everything we do centers women. What does this mean? Is that at Unconform, we are a design consultancy and we partner with organizations to help them build products, services, experiences, and programs that truly center, serve, and value women. We help organizations get smarter about women's lived experiences, go further in their research faster, and be more equitable from the get-go. How do we do some of this is that we consult on projects and partner on projects such as this one with IDEO. We create resources at the intersection of women and design. One of our main resources is the Women-Centric Design Toolkit, which is a set of tools and frameworks to help to equip design practitioners center women in their design process. The Women-Centric Design Toolkit actually was a foundation for this collaboration with the Last Mile Money team, where we as a team got to research, build upon, and expand on that definition of gender lens in gender lens investing through the gender evaluation framework that we've created. So as we share this framework with you, you'll also get to hear tidbits of the Women-Centric Design Toolkit, which was huge in informing this gender evaluation framework that we created. And why we at Unconform were really excited to be part of this is especially that piece around building upon and expanding the definition of what gender lens can mean in product strategies, in venture teams, in startups, and in financial digital services. All right, with that, let's jump a little bit into what inspired us as the foundation for this project and the direction we took towards defining that expanded definition of gender lens for this project. So we didn't have to start at ground zero here for this project. There are so many existing gender lens investing toolkits and frameworks already out there. And we started by looking into those, starting to see, what is really something that a lot of these gender lens frameworks talk often about and see as important. and also what was resonating with us from these gender lens frameworks, and also where we felt the opportunity to build upon. So for example, we looked into the gender GZ manual from CEIF and the ICRW Gender Smart Guide. There are others that are created from Value for Women, and others that have already created foundational gender lens investing toolkits. And what we found is that there is this immense focus and this really important focus on foundational workforce-related metrics. So what we mean by this is that a lot of these toolkits are looking at whether organizations are women-founded or women-led, or the ratio of the workforce participation, how much of that is women. They're looking at things like pay equity and how much of the supply chain is led by women, and sort of metrics like that. And the main thing to note here is that we cannot really have a gender lens without some of these foundational metrics that these toolkits are mentioning. We cannot design for women without designing with women. And how do we do some of that? It's by having these women-led and women-founded and women-owned organizations that have some of these high participation of women in the workforce. They create safe and healthy environments and such. And at the same time, taking these foundational workforce-related metrics as a foundation for our framework, we also found that there is room to expand on what gender lens can mean in terms of the way that products and services are serving their end users, and especially those end users being women at the last mile for this particular framework. So we wanted to better define what gender lens means if we looked at what women-centric products and services can mean. And so with that, we started to create our gender evaluation framework. And the first step we took was to define our central question or inquiry around what we wanted to create, what gender lens should mean for us. And so our central inquiry became, how might we evaluate a digital finance venture's intent, action, commitment, and impact towards serving women's needs at the last mile? So if we break this question down, we were evaluating digital finance ventures who were applying to the Last Mile Money Accelerator, and we were trying to understand what is their intent, action, commitment, and impact towards wanting to serve women with the products and services that they were creating. And I want to take a moment here to mention that the intent, action, commitment, and impact became the foundational pillars of our gender lens definition for this framework. And so I'll take a moment now to explain to you how we built upon these pillars and how our framework is structured to bring the best impact forward. Taking a moment to just define these and then sharing the structure of the framework with you. So intent, how are we defining intent? Here we were trying to figure out or evaluate if ventures are including a gender lens in their research design, the content of it, and the way that the research was being conducted. For action, we were trying to evaluate if ventures are turning the gender-related insights that they find from their research into product features and actually solving for some of these barriers and needs of women that they've uncovered in their research. Under commitment, we were trying to evaluate if they really are committed to having this gender lens. And the way we were doing that is trying to see if gender-related success metrics were present alongside other success metrics. Ventures have all kinds of success metrics, and we wanted to see if gender made it into that as well. And finally, impact, we were looking at some of the more traditional metrics that are there already in many of these ventures, and the reach and retention of women, and if real change was being driven for them. So once we had these pillars, we tried to figure out, we had to understand, how do we see if ventures are doing these things? And so we created a structure underneath the pillars. So for each of the 4 pillars, we created some overarching criteria that we were looking at as the evaluation team. And then we created a list of more micro indicators that would help us see if those criteria were being met. And so what we'll do now is take you through each of these pillars one by one share some of those overarching criteria and share some of those indicators with you that we created. And as we do that, I think what I would, if you're listening to this recording, I would encourage you to think about what are some of the criteria and indicators that would make sense for you within the domains that you're working in. You might not be in digital financial services. What kind of criteria and indicators would you look for? Because intent, action, commitment, and results are things that we can apply in all sorts of. All right, so let's get into it. We'll start with intent. So as I mentioned, intent was all about research and discovery and ensuring that women are a part of the research process. So here are criteria, and what we were really looking for was to understand if the venture is including women in their research, and if their methods that they're using for research are inspired by feminist research, or they're done in a way that really include women. Here we were also trying to see if ventures have a strong point of view on including women, like they were strongly committed to actually have a reasoning behind including women. And we were trying to see if they're able to tease out gender-related insights and really understand and articulate the needs of women and the barriers women face. So how do we get to understand what are some of these indicators that that really connect to these overarching criteria? And here's what we came up with. We were trying to look for a regular cadence or any sort of cadence of conversing with women if ventures are able to speak to that. We were trying to look for stories if ventures were involving women from the community to co-design and also conduct the research with the communities that they were actually trying to serve. This is a huge feminist research method to include the women from the community. And we were trying to see if they were doing that. We were looking for stories around how the research was designed and conducted and whether those methods were safe, accessible, and convenient for the women that they were trying to serve. We were trying to look for whether or not the product venture team has a deep understanding of if and how women's financial lives are different from those of men. And we were trying to see if they're able to articulate some of those insights that uncover barriers that women face related to digital financial services. These are some of the indicators that we were looking for under the intent pillar. For each of these pillars, we'll also be sharing a quick example to really help you see how to put this into application. So we'll be using the product Finja that the Last Mile Money Accelerator has worked with, which is a stock credit capital solution for micro merchants. And Finja was really interested in extending this project to rural markets, especially to rural women merchants. And so the rural women merchants, who they call Goody Bajis, they were trying to have a better understanding of how they can, reach these women and also explore the effectiveness of credit in their lives. And so in order to do that, what this team did was that they created a specific and targeted research effort to understand the needs of Goody Bajis. They made sure that the researchers that were designing and conducting this research looked and spoke like them. So they used Goody Bajis to speak to the Goody Bajis that they wanted to reach. They also, one of the things that they did was that they used one of their existing partnerships. They looked for organizations that might already have the trust and were already operating in the community and partnered with those organizations in order to reach these women so that they had this additional level of trust going in. So this is one example of how we might understand the intent of a venture team. Next, we move into action, which is all about turning these women-centric insights, the research we've just done from the intent phase, and seeing if they were able to turn those into actually solving the problem and into action. So here we were looking for stories of product features that match the commonly overlooked needs of women. We were looking for stories if the ventures had been inspired by other solutions out there that were designing with and for women. And we were also looking for stories about how they are having a long-term vision around continuing to make their product more and more gender holistic. So here, the indicators we were looking for were, okay, are product ventures trying to build for a safer experience? Specifically here, are they able to define what financial safety means for women, and how are they translating that into a product feature? We're trying to see if products are building for time poverty because women are more likely to be more time poor, and how they're building for other biological or gender differences that women experience, such as specifically in financial services, it's the information asymmetry. Women get information much later in their lives. We were trying to see if they're designing for culturally specific barriers such as mobility, which is something that women are more likely to experience. Another thing that we were looking for here were if and how ventures were building narratives that shift gendered stereotypes. In women-centric design, and something I've learned in my research is that often we are operating in this space of having to solve short-term problems, but with having a long-term vision in mind. And so you might have to make the hard choice of perpetuating or operating within an established gender norm in the short term to solve a short-term solution. But it is important to think about how you can also have the long-term solution in mind and nudge towards creating narratives that shift those gendered stereotypes. So these were some of the indicators that we were looking for in this action pillar. And how that translated for Finja was also really interesting. So as it's carrying on from the example from before, they were trying to understand how they can extend their product and really meet the credit needs of women, of these goodie bajis at the last mile. And one of the things they learned from their research was trying to understand the fears around debt. And what they learned is that although most of their user base was scared of engaging with a product that may not be Islamic compliant, both men and women, one of the things that especially their women merchants were concerned about was taking on debt that might be transferred to their families if it's not repaid in time. So they were worried about leaving their families in debt. And so with this insight, they were able to create a product feature that met the needs of these goodie bajis, but also actually created a product features that was helpful for many more of their users. So what they did was, in order to allay some of these fears around leaving their families in debt, they created a feature so that women could repay as they created their income. So they could see their debt going down as they were because they were doing these repayments as you go. They also created this feature around transparency and agency. They increased the ability to share information, and so thereby creating trust with these goodie bajis. And then they also created the Islamic compliance nudges and trust indicators by including imams to communicate to the goodie bajis that this product is in fact Islamic compliant, thereby allaying the fears around religious incompliance. So these were this is an example and stories around how some of those insights from the intent phase were translated into product features and really turned into action. With that, I will hand over to Kanika to speak to us to share about the commitment and impact pillars.
Thanks, Mansi. So to quickly talk about the commitment pillar, in the commitment pillar, what we were really trying to understand is, do startup teams actively track gender metrics? Do they provide equal importance to gender metrics just as they would to metrics like revenue, profit, customer acquisition? And do they have a strategy or a point of view on how to manage, grow, and retain their women customers that might, in some instances, actually look different from their general or larger male customer base? And so how do these criteria translate into indicators? So around the metrics bit, we were trying to understand, do they actually collect sex disaggregated data to be able to better understand usage patterns of women when compared to other other users? Do they try and maintain a ratio of men and women customers that doesn't feel like it's skewed in any one particular direction, that feels optimal for their product and their and the region that they're working in? Do they have OKRs and KPIs to help them track towards these goals and towards these metrics? Are they intently finding partners so they can collaborate with organizations who help them reach women more easily and more economically? And do they understand what success looks like to women customers, and how do they interpret that, and how do they include that in their product strategy, in their product design, and in their goals? So just coming back to the Finja example, Finja was actually very keen to reach these rural women customers. What they did was they went ahead and actually designed an additional layer within their distribution strategy to include women distributors or field staff that were closer to these women and who had more trust with these women because they were from the community. Like Mansi mentioned, they actually redesigned the terms of the loan to enable better usage and more contextual usage among women. They actively tracked their performance amongst women customers, benchmarked it against their other customers, and ran an entire monitoring and evaluation assessment to basically figure out whether the product had the right kind of impact on their women. All of this really showed us that Finja actually went above and beyond, their product design to actually actively staying committed to reaching these women, serving these women, and engaging with these women customers. The last pillar is around impact, where we were, in this particular instance, assessing startup teams on their reach related indicators and the impact that their product was having on women customers. But before we get into some of the indicators under this, I do want to highlight that we believe this fourth pillar is more an outcome of doing the previous three pillars right. So we believe if you have intent that translates to action and that can be demonstrated through your commitment and your strategy, you will almost likely see impact, both in terms of your reach in women as well as in how your product impacts women's lives positively. So some of the indicators under impact are, of course, the number of customers or number of distributors engaged within the product, but also engagement. So retention numbers. Are women staying and continuing to use the product? Are women actually actively speaking about the product? Do they advocate for the product? In terms of the impact of the product on women, to understand if it's actually improving women's income or economic opportunity. Is it increasing their access to otherwise inaccessible financial services, products, or markets? And is it making them feel more empowered in their financial lives? Whether it is amongst other women, whether it is within their family, or whether it is just for themselves. And in the case of Finja, actually, we saw all of these three things happening. We saw that women were actively able to increase their income. They reported a nearly 5x increase in their income because of the liquidity that the loans that Finja provided offered them. It increased their financial empowerment and made them feel more confident in their abilities and their capabilities. Many were actually now able to pay their children's school fees And it reduced the burden that they had, because they weren't worried about what they were leaving behind for their family or what they were saving for their family. And actually, Finja was able to actively grow and reach nearly 3,000 of these women through the Goody Baji network. So this is just an indication that if you have intent, action, and commitment, you will most likely see impact and positive results on women of your product.
Um, Kanika, I just quickly want to add a note on that too, as you were speaking, is, I think what you said about if you have the first three pillars, it leads to the last pillar. I think it's so important because we also saw some ventures come in who were operating in domains that are more likely to have women users, like groceries or fashion or things like that, right? And if we just look at the impact pillar itself, we will see, oh, they have so many women users. But that doesn't always automatically mean that they are designing with their needs in mind. It just means that they're operating in domains that women are more likely to be merchants in, or women are more likely to be engaging with because of the domain. And so that's why I think that point is really important, just that impact is a pillar that can reflect our action within the first three pillars. I'll hand back to you for the application piece.
For that, Mansi, that's actually such a important point, because that was actually something that we were actively considering. So when we would look at startups at a really large reach in women, we would then go back and ask ourselves, is this by nature of where they're operating or the domain that they're working in, or is this through an intentional commitment to reach those women and actively include those women? And which is why looking at all four pillars holistically becomes so much more important. Just quickly to wrap this up, we wanted to share with you some examples of how we applied this framework. This is by no means the only way to apply the framework. So please feel free to reach out to us if you have more creative ways of how you might apply this, or if you plan to apply it and you learn something more. We'd love to learn from you. But if you are an investor and accelerator, one thing we realized, and actually going back to Mansi's point, is there are a lot of startups that end up reaching a lot of women customers, either by accident or by nature of where they're operating. And there are many who have an active intent to reach women, but might not necessarily reach the same number in quantum as someone else who is operating in a more women-centric environment. And so while both have impact on women, the way they tell their stories can end up sounding different. And what we were trying to figure out is, how do we help startup teams craft a more holistic narrative around their gender intentionality? How do we help them bring to the forefront their intent, their action, their commitment, and impact to women, and not just focus on impact? And we were trying to do it in ways that allowed them to tell us anecdotally, because not always are these startups thinking in these pillars or operating in these pillars. And it might take some time for frameworks like these to become part of the norm. And so until then, we have to enable startups to give us that information, which exists probably with them, but probably doesn't always see the light of day because they're not prompted to share those stories with us. And so within the intent pillar, some of the questions we found really compelling answers to and really helped us evaluate startups better was, is there a story that they could share about an opportunity area they discovered when speaking with women, and how did they learn about that, and what did they do about it? How can they share with us a few insights on what building for women users means to them and how they discovered those insights. This way, they not just talk about the insight, but they also talk about the process that led them to that insight. The second one under action is if they can very specifically point us to, hey, based on this insight, was there a feature in your product that you actually designed or developed? How did women users actually respond or react to that product, especially when compared to other users of that product? Did they were women users using it more? Were they using it less? This way, they can really show us how they built or designed something specifically from learning from women, and how they're continuously learning about what works for women. In the third pillar around commitment, I think here we were really trying to understand if they have sex disaggregated data, if these are numbers that they are actively tracking, that they can give us answers to around how many users, women users, do you have right now? What proportion do they make up of your entire user base? How do you reach these women users? Who do you partner with? And within that partnership, what do women agents do, and how many women agents would you have if you specifically have agents or distributors who are women? And finally, in the impact pillar, while the numbers tell us one story, I think the bigger questions that we try to ask is, what are they doing to grow their women users? And what are some North Star goals and metrics that they're tracking around these women? It could be their increase in income or their increase in um, um, loans or their increase in savings. Can we have a better assessment of what those North Star goals are to improve women's financial lives? These kind of questions really gave us more in-depth answers, and helped entrepreneurs tell their story more compellingly. If you are an entrepreneur, we've created almost like a self-diagnostic tool where, as you go through the pillars, you can write down things that you do under this pillar, and then there's almost this meter that you can adjust to figure out if you're doing well in that pillar or if you need more help around the pillar. And just to give you an example, we fill this out for Finja, where you'll see that under intent, they were doing a lot. They reached many women. They actively onboarded an NGO to learn from these women. They ensured their researchers looked and spoke the same language as those women. So they ranked quite highly. But on the other hand, on impact, while they did grow the number of women users, and for that small number of women users, they saw an uptick in income, the overall percentage of women users compared to all of their users still were under 10%. And so that's where they probably needed more help. So this way you can write down and assess more specifically under each of the pillars what you might be doing. This way, what you would also be able to do is, as you list these things down, you can start to more strategically tell your story around each of these pillars, and showcase how you are holistically thinking about gender lens when it comes to product design. This is about it. Thank you so much for listening. Mansi, I don't know if you had anything else to add before I...
No, thank you so much, Kanika. We are just very curious if you are listening to this and have thoughts, or you want to try to apply it and you try it, please share feedback with us. One of the things about this work is that it's always a work in progress. So this was our first iteration. We learned a lot. We already see room for improvement, and we would love to include more people's perspective and experience as we continue to grow this.
Exactly what Mansi said. We want to keep learning with you all. So please share feedback and builds on the framework. Here's our email IDs, and we'd love to continue to stay in touch. Hope you enjoyed listening to this, and stay in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.